I'm a clinical psychologist trained as an anxiety specialist, and for decades I've helped people work through their social anxiety. So I've found that most of the discomfort that we feel in social situations comes from 5 beliefs that operate quietly in the background. So today, I want to walk you through what I call the 5 dominoes and why stopping even one can change how you feel around people. So think about the way that dominoes work. Somebody just knocks the first one over and each one hits the next one and it does the whole chain. Our beliefs around social anxiety kind of work the same way. You enter that situation and it knocks over all of these beliefs all in a row, and you go from maybe feeling okay to then triggering the experience of social anxiety. And my goal is that I will loosen these a little bit for you so that you're less likely to feel anxious. Here are the beliefs, and here is what I want you to know about them. Number one, something's wrong with me. So underneath our discomfort in social situations is this belief that we're not good enough in some way. There's something wrong with us. When we enter a social situation where we get anxious, it's because on some level we're afraid that that is going to show up. But also, the majority of people worry to a certain extent about this. So we are really not alone if we have these feelings that we have imperfections that will get judged. There are certain things that we tend to think are flaws. And a lot of us agree on these. Maybe they're not telling it to you, but we know from the research that it tends to fall into 3 different categories. The most common is social skill concerns. So we feel like we're boring, or we're weird, or we don't come across as smart enough. The second is appearance concerns. We think that we don't look good enough, we don't look acceptable. This tends to be facial stuff, our weight, hair. The third thing people tend to worry about not being good enough is visible signs of anxiety. So these are things like blushing or stuttering or trembling. Statistically, 20 to 30% of us are really worried about being judged for these things. Whether or not they tell that to you, they maybe are keeping it to themselves. I have at various times kind of run through the whole catalog of these concerns. Physically, I have rosacea, which causes my white circles that people comment on a lot. When I would get anxious, my mind would go blank and my voice would shake. I've had a lot of these things that I'd worry about at various times. I will say good news, I have worked on this a lot in my past, and you can get to a point where these things just don't bother you anymore. Number two, people will notice. If we believe that it's invisible, we're going to feel fine. The social anxiety just doesn't happen. But the belief that people can look and see it is the next belief that gets us feeling socially anxious. But this is something that we can really work on loosening. You may have heard about the spotlight effect. We feel like there is a spotlight on us and that people are looking at us, but the research just says we tend to overestimate by 2 times how obvious things are. So there's so much information going on at the same time that we just can't process it all. And so what that means is our imperfections or the way we stumble, the things we think we're screwing up, there's a really good chance that people aren't noticing that. The reason we have a belief that people really do notice largely is because we notice. If we have an imperfection or we have some acne that day or we screw something up, we are so aware of it that we assume other people are aware of it. But we're aware of it because it really matters to us, and they're not because it doesn't really matter to them. And if we get anxious, there's something called the illusion of transparency. So it's this illusion that our emotions are just obvious to other people. But I find it applies to overestimating anything we feel that is flawed about us. So we tend to have this idea of how we come across to others that takes the things that we believe are imperfections and it blows them up. So they're much, much bigger. So I've done this so many times. I'll have people videotape an interaction with me so that the things they're afraid of come out. So they show their imperfections. Then they actually watch the videotape and they compare it and they realize that what they thought was big and obvious was actually really subtle or not noticeable at all. If you want to get a little more into these treatment stories, I get into this in a lot of depth in my book. So you can check that out. And maybe you're thinking, okay, it's not quite as noticeable as I thought. Great. But people are going to notice sometimes, right? I'm not completely invisible. Number 3, they'll judge me for it. That next domino is this belief, this underlying belief that if they do notice this imperfection, they're going to think it's a flaw and they're going to be judgmental of it. This is one of those beliefs that drives social anxiety. So it's worth looking a little more closely at it. What if your insecurity, your imperfection gets observed by somebody and they don't judge it? What if they accept it instead? Has that ever happened? Could that happen? I have a lot of stories where people's perceived flaws actually turn out to be perfectly acceptable. I would argue that most things that people are worried about, there is a subset of the population that thinks those are good things, not bad things. I have always been very skinny, and I've sort of grown up being that way. I have doctors tell me I'm underweight, I need to gain weight. That was an insecurity. But strangely, as I've gone through my life, I've met people who like that. What to me is a flaw, to them is a positive. Yeah, so as well as being like really slim, skinny, I also have a lot of feminine interests and personality traits. And that was something I was worried about, embarrassed about when I was younger. But then I remember I was early in grad school, I started dating someone who told me, oh yeah, I really like feminine guys. What I perceived as a flaw was seen by somebody as a positive. Blushing, which people get really concerned about, has actually been shown in some research to make people more likable and more trustworthy under certain conditions. In therapy, right, people come and tell me what these things are. And a lot of times I'm like, I don't think everyone agrees with you on that. For example, for somebody it was that he doesn't like listening to music. That's fine. In general, what I'll point out is that we have a ton of research, and this comes up again and again. We can't accurately tell what people will think about us. We just have a documented tendency to overestimate how harsh people will be in their judgment and how big of a deal they'll think these things are. Part of where that comes from, right, is we can't actually read people's minds. So instead, we think about our own thoughts about these things and we just project them into somebody else's head. There's things that we have that we perceive as being problems, flaws, and maybe it came from a particular person or an experience when we were young that we learned, oh, this is a bad thing about me. But it may not mean that everybody sees it that way. Not everyone is going to be accepting. Not everyone is going to be warm, but some people are. I think in real life, most people are pretty accepting and pretty nice, more so than we imagine. I have found people in my life who have seen what I think of as kind of my more negative qualities or my insecurities, and they have been harsh and critical about them. But I've also found people who have seen these vulnerabilities in me, but have been warm and have been accepting. We believe we have these flaws. We believe that people are going to notice them. We believe that they will judge them. And that leads us in to our next belief and the most painful part of all. Number 4, I'll get rejected or I'll lose my status. Psychologically, I would argue perfection isn't particularly appealing. We want the humanity. We want people to be a bit messy. So one of the studies I can just never stop talking about, they tricked people into revealing their insecurities and mistakes, their vulnerabilities. They compared them to other people who just revealed their strengths and accomplishments. What they found is that the ones who revealed the negative things about themselves were actually better liked. And what I find so interesting about this, and the lesson I want you to take from it, is it's not because they like screw-ups, they like negative traits, that they like vulnerabilities. It's because they love genuineness. They love authenticity. And being authentic is more important than the negative things we reveal for the most part. So a lot of people out there who think because I have this one problem, I have no chance at anything happening. Instead, look at it as being one piece within the complexity of who you are and work on pushing, growing all of your strengths because it's going to put whatever your flaws are in context. That's how people process us. By the way, since so many of these beliefs show up around dating and connection specifically, this is something I want to get deeper into. So I'm planning to do an online workshop around confidence in dating and connecting. And I really want to understand where I can be most helpful for you. There's a short form below if you'd like to share your input. A great thanks to all of you who filled it out so far. I can already tell that it's going to make this a really good workshop. That last one was about people could think that we have these flaws and still not reject us. But what if they do? And this takes us to our last domino here. Number 5, I won't be able to handle that. This is the belief at the end of the chain, if I get rejected or I lose that status, I will not be able to tolerate it. If you really want to prevent yourself from feeling social anxiety, just stop this last domino from getting knocked over. If you are okay tolerating rejection, if you don't mind it, you are not going to get socially anxious. What I will say is I find the people who as adults have not experienced much rejection tend to be the ones most afraid of it. People who have gone out and dealt with a lot of it, they tend to kind of get used to it. You know, maybe they have those jobs like in sales or something where you have to go and ask for things and get turned down a lot. But if you can do this a bunch of times, you can get over it. I have done this in my life multiple times. I've done it for romantic stuff where I deliberately went out and got rejected by people I found attractive, but I've done it in different arenas too. Most recently, I've had to do it on this channel, right? Because I am taking this risk of putting my ideas, my work out there to be consumed. And so I get a lot of warm, kind people that say nice things in response. I also get a bunch of criticism, and I have had to learn to be okay with that version of rejection. And I am. At this point, it doesn't bother me. I have a very strong mission with this channel, which is to help people with all of these things, with self-confidence, with social connection, and trying to remove the barriers to these. So I am very much willing to tolerate all the criticism and failures that come in the service of that. When I was in my early 20s, I really wanted to get over my fear of rejection, which I had been avoiding at all costs. If you wanted to date me, you needed to tell me directly. I wanted to get over that, so I decided to do basically an exposure therapy where I'd go face rejection every single day from the person that I found most attractive that day. I collected a lot of data on what rejection looks like. I was afraid it was like the stuff from the movies and social media and all that. In reality, people were just really nice. They rejected me, but they were so soft and kind and warm, and they went out of their way to try to save face for me so I didn't feel bad about myself. For anybody who's about to respond, yes, there are outliers. There was somebody who said, "Don't talk to me, I don't like your face." But that stood out as somebody who was kind of breaking the rule. So we really want to focus on learning to tolerate rejection. We want to be okay with rejection. We don't want to like it. It sucks and it's painful, but we want to learn how to tolerate it. There are things that we know from the science can make it not hurt as much. If we do it repeatedly, we can get less afraid of it. If there is a rejection, it's not a rejection. It is simply somebody kindly telling us they're not a fit for the moment. If we can stop any of these dominoes from hitting the other one, from falling over, then it's going to get in the way of feeling that social anxiety and all of the stuff that we don't like. Let's put it all together. Whatever you think is wrong with you might not come out. If it does, there's a very good chance that people won't notice it. Even if they do notice it, they might not interpret it as some big problem. They might think it's normal, they might think it's minor. Even if they agree, yes, it's an imperfection, they may not be this all or nothing deal breaker person. They might be okay with it in the context of all your other traits. After all, nobody is perfect in real life. So you know what? They might even be one of those less judgmental people who values kindness, just like you probably do. And even if it all goes horribly wrong, you can still learn to tolerate rejection. Now that you know why your anxiety spikes in social situations and how to loosen its grip, you can start to focus on the real goal, which is connecting with people. If you want the exact skills to spark real conversations and move past small talk, watch this next video.